Let's talk about black homicides, folks. And that is, a new study says homicide is first of all, a leading cause of death for children in the United States. The overall rate has increased on average of 4.3% each year for nearly a decade. The rate of homicides in black children increased 16.6% from 2018 to 2020. Black and Hispanic children have been victims of a steady increase in homicides since 2012 and 2014. From 1999 to 2020, 38,362 children were homicide victims, folks, in this country. The researchers found that overall homicide rates increased the most for boys, rising 16.1% between 2018 and 2020. The JAMA Pediatrics study also found that black boys were killed more than any other group, with firearms as the most common weapon used in these deaths. When you think about that, Michael, we have to look at these homicide deaths also in a different way. Mm-hmm. You're now talking about that number of black men, boys, who will never be fathers.
Right.
Who will never be husbands. Who will never be wage earners. Now you're talking about that number having a negative impact on the economics of the black community because they're dying. Oh, the funeral homes are doing gangbusters. But if you're talking about a black boy dying before he's 20 or 25, you're not talking about somebody who is not even a part of this life for 50 years and the impact, the negative impact that it has on families. And what I keep saying in this country, the problem that we have when we talk about homicide rates, the response in America is send more cops. Cops do not prevent violence. They catch perpetrators. If you are not dealing with the underlying issues of violence, you're not going to deal with the homicide issue.
Yeah, you know, that is a big part of it. And then also another part of this is that all this is operating within a system of white supremacy and racism. And the reason why I say that is because you only protect what you respect. You only protect what you respect. So when we look at black boys were killed more than any other group, you have to see African-American boys as across the nation as a whole, not just talking about the African-American community, but the nation as a whole. You have to see African-American boys of being worthy of saving to understand why this is so important and why resources have to be allocated to deal with the underlying causes of violence, especially gun violence, and deaths, especially gun deaths, as opposed to seeing African-American boys as criminals or future criminals. When we look at the research from Dr. Philip Atiba Goff, okay, and his study is at the American Psychological Association's website. This is just an example. It talks about how African-American boys as young as 5 years old are perceived to be more dangerous, okay, and perceived to look older than they actually are, okay? And it talks about the relationship between African-American boys and police. And just to give a quick example here, when we look at Tamir Rice, I know this goes beyond police violence, but I'm just giving a quick example. When we look at Tamir Rice was 12 years old, but the Cuyahoga County white prosecutor said Tamir Rice appeared to be 20 years old. OK, and he was treated like a 20-year-old man as opposed to a 12-year-old boy. I know it's a specific case, but it gives some insight into how we're treated here in America. So this is, I think, something that we really have to look at, and legislation and resources have to be allocated to address this issue. But at the same time, when we deal with violence in our communities where we are killing one another as well, Black lives do matter, but Black lives also have to matter to Black people as well. Okay, so this is extremely important, and it's a multifaceted problem.
And the thing here, Mustafa, black lives do matter to black people, but you still have to deal with what is causing that. John Hope Bryant, Operation Hope founder, says it all the time. You've never seen a riot in a neighborhood with a credit score of 700 or higher. There's a direct correlation between homicide rates and poverty and education and opportunity.
Exactly. You know, we've created these sacrifice zones across our country, and we never really want to unpack what that actually looks like. So you talked about a couple of those elements. One of them, you know, is around education and making sure that we have these holistic strategies where we're not just dealing with education, but we're also dealing with the food insecurities that are in there, because kids can't learn and families can't actually thrive if they don't have the nutrition that's necessary. We often don't talk about also what's happened in relationship to banking and how we have had these disinvestments inside of our communities that create these sacrifice zones, you know, and then we also have to look at the pollution that's also in there. There are a number of studies that show when temperatures increase, when pollution increases, then we also know that violence inside of communities increases. I bring all this in because it is about these cumulative sets of impacts that are happening inside of our communities that destabilize the communities. And this destabilization has happened because of policy and the decisions that were made and continue to be made. And it has also happened because of the lack of investments in a holistic way to actually change the dynamics that are going on inside of our community. See, we will continue to put Band-Aids on things. We will continue to make these sets of investments where there's these one-offs, but we refuse to actually change how we're funding, how we are doing policy, how we are actually honoring these communities by making sure that we help them to move from surviving to thriving. And if we're not willing to do that, then we're going to continue to see these lives that are being lost by black boys and black girls and adults and others. So we have a...
Looks like we lost Mustafa for a second there. Randy, go ahead.
You know, I agree with what my brothers are saying here today. It's such, the statistics are... I believe I become extremely angry, though, when I hear people say, but what about black on black crime, as if our young brothers are monsters or something's wrong with them. Whereas one, homicide is a crime of affiliation, association, and proximity. You know, white on white crime is about the same stats as black on black crime. That's one. But our young brothers are being raised in communities that, you know, they can barely survive. They're trying their best, and it literally is, for some of them, they're having to fight to just stay alive. And no one wants to look at that. They want to look at the individual young people and not a system that has not invested in our children, that has left them with poor schools, with a family structure broken, with transportation where they can't even get out of those communities, and just trying to make it. And so when desperate people will do desperate things, it's hard to also get a person who hasn't been taught to love themselves, because everything tells them they shouldn't, to all of a sudden value the life of somebody else. So I really want us to look at these stats in a holistic way and understand all the systems that have contributed to us being there, and to fix the systems and not act as if there's something wrong with our young men. They need our help.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.